Hello, attendees, and welcome. If you could please type in your name and where you're tuning in from in the comments box, much appreciated. Like this video so others in your network can enjoy the same content. Welcome to IFMA's latest Return on Investment in Attaining IFMA Credentials, company-focused webinar. Today's webinar examines the highlights from the report, which will be located within the IFMA store in the next 2 weeks. The report is available for purchase. IFMA member pricing is at $195 and non-IFMA member pricing is at $245. Participants within this study will receive a free copy of the final report. Today's presenter is Kristen Hurtado, PhD FMP, teaching professor, Arizona State University, School of Sustainable Engineering and the Built Environment. Over to you, Kristen.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. Really excited to be here today presenting all of this to you. I love this stuff. I will be sharing the highlights, key findings, and results of this research. So come along with me and I'll share what we found. In addition to that, I believe I have plenty of time to take your questions. We're probably going to hold most of those until the end. So please put them in the chat. I do want to get to all of your questions. And if you attend a webinar around this time last year, you may be thinking this is deja vu. What's a little bit different here with this study is we looked at the perspectives of organizations, so companies, and their perspective of the value of IFMA credentials. And like I said, I'll be presenting the key findings and results. For the rest of this presentation, I'm going to give you a little bit of introduction about me and who I represent, talk about the study, again, those key findings as it relates to the current state, feedback from those who do approve funding of credentials, and the key findings of that value proposition, and again, Q&A. So again, I am with Arizona State University. I'm here in sunny Tempe, Arizona. It's not quite winter yet, as you can tell by my no sleeves, but happy to be here and been a part of this research and a lot of different things across facilities management. It's such a passion of mine. In fact, I was teaching last night to some young and upcoming professionals about facilities management. I'm located in the School of Construction, and we have concentrations in facilities management and degrees and all that good stuff. And we were talking about the project lifecycle. And the students that I'm teaching are fairly young and very focused on the new stuff. And so I love to open their world talking about facilities management and operations and how that's really the bigger part of the life cycle, the longest part, the life, where it actually begins versus construction. So again, I've been in this space for quite a bit. I spent some time working in construction, working for contractors, working on the facilities management side, and now I enjoy teaching and doing research in both spaces. So like I said, really excited to be here. I've helped a lot of people achieve their IFMA credentials. I have some IFMA credentials as well, so been down this road. Luckily, didn't have to make the business case for funding my training, although that was quite some time ago. And I also have my PhD where I studied and created models around training and how to actually do that. So like I said, this is my sauce, and it's great to be here and present that to all of you. I'm also part of a larger group called Simplar, and we do a fair amount of research for this group and for the Benchmarking Institute here at IFMA. And across our consortium, we have a lot of different universities. So some of you might see some logos you recognize, which is all great. And we do a lot of other training in areas, tools and whatnot to actually help those in facilities and operations from the operation side, in addition to when you renovate and build new buildings and sort of the owner side and being a good owner and a good client. So like I said, I'm part of a larger group, even though it is just me here in this room today. There's a bigger group here. And what's exciting, like I said, a lot of the stuff we've done for IFMA over the years, these reports, I mean, they're fantastic. I don't know if you guys follow really closely on LinkedIn and all the updates IFMA gives, but there was one really recently that was featured on 60 Minutes for a couple minutes, and we got really excited when we saw that. So these reports do get noticed. They are important. I'm guessing most of you responded to this survey when I released it over the summer. So thank you for responding. Your results and information is important. And it's so helpful to advance our industry to contribute to research like this, to reports like this, even if it is taking 15, 20 minutes max to answer a survey, to go through all those questions. We really do appreciate it, and we want you to continue to do that. We read all of your comments. I read all of them. I pore over them, which is why it takes me forever to write these reports when I get so many text-based responses. But again, it is important. So thank you for those of you that did contribute to this research. And as Nick said at the beginning of this presentation, you're going to get a copy of this report as well. We're putting all the final touches on it, but you will receive it. So like I said, highlights here on the reports. And if you don't know where to get those reports, we can direct you to that. Okay, so now I want to talk specifically about this study and the amazing things we found. For those of you who don't know, and most of you probably do, IFMA does have 3 credentials: the CFM, which stands for Certified Facility Manager, the FMP, which stands for Facility Management Professional, and the SFP, Sustainability Facility Professional. You can't say those all 3 in a row without being tongue-tied. So that was the focus of this research. Up front in our questions and also in our interviews, we did keep it fairly broad and weren't talking specifically about the credentials. And then later on, we got into those credentials. So part of it is explaining the landscape and what's going on overall. And then the other piece of it is with IFMA credentials specifically. And when I get to that point in the presentation, I'll let you know when we're talking IFMA credentials only versus broadly, just sort of any professional development, from 30-minute presentation course kind of things, online stuff, to IFMA credentials. Specifically focused on IFMA credentials and the value that they represent. This isn't the first time we've done it. So there were 2 reports in 2017 that you may have seen. And again, if you're on this webinar, chances are you probably contributed to those. So again, thank you. That first one in 2017, we really looked at the ROI, or the return on investment, to the individual credential holder. So the single employee, what was the value to them, and the amazing things that we found in that. Then as part of that, we looked at companies, and we didn't maybe get as much as we would have liked to in terms of data. I think a lot of people were thinking, oh, wait, you're asking us these questions again. Why do we need to ask these questions again? So this time we gave them a little bit more space. We said, okay, we're going to do this one, then we'll a little space, then we'll do the next one from the company perspective. But when you think about training, it isn't necessarily a one-sided perspective. A lot of us do ask for funding or time away or some sort of support to get our training. It takes time away from work. And so that involves companies and organizations having to make key decisions about that as well. So they're a stakeholder as much as an individual employee is in the broader IFMA picture of the value of IFMA credentials. So that's why we have both. They're both important. So we did release the 2022 report for just the individual employee. So what is, my ROI for getting my FMP or my CFM? That is already published. That's already out there. Fantastic results. I won't be talking too much about that today, but please go ahead and get that. It is super helpful and important to making that business case if you are kind of that lone person asking for funding or time from your organization. Or if you already paid for it, you're saying, hey, look what I got. This further substantiates it. So for today, for this report, once again, we are talking about organizations and the organizational or company level perspective. And the focus is on these 3 key areas. It's kind of like a funnel. So current state indicators, what's going on with FM training overall. Then we know that not everyone has support within their company to pay for training. So not all companies can write a check. So we want to talk to those that make that decision. Those decision makers or approvers. Then we want to know just overall, what are those value key propositions for getting IFMA credentials, once again, from a company or an organization perspective. As any good research goes, we start testing our survey through interviews, and then we release our survey, then we have follow-up interviews. So once again, thank you to those that took this survey. It was less than 20 questions. It was fairly quick, and it took less than 10 minutes. So again, sometimes these are quick, and again, thank you for responding. That's what we had released. high level here, again, the report will have a lot more details. We wanted to look at the representativeness of people who responded. So who's actually responded to the survey before we dig into what the data says or the survey results say. When we look at it across the globe, it was really exciting to see across the almost 1,200 responses, we had 55 different countries. So I think all too often, research efforts kind of focus on specific geographic areas, for better or worse. IFMA's global. We got global results. So that was fantastic to see. And you can see in the map there how it all shook out. There were 829 different companies, which again, really exciting, really helpful to see that. We didn't want to be narrow in our focus, and we hoped we didn't get results that were from just a handful of companies. Quite broad, right? Almost, way more than I had expected. So that was fantastic to see. When we do look at the countries, the top ones that responded were the US, Canada, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, India, and the UAE. So just for that perspective. When we talk about company size, so we talked about location and company in terms of diversity. Now, in terms of size, while we did see the most common was more than 5,000 employees, it was quite varied. That was only 31%. So it wasn't as if we got all the answers from big companies or all the answers from small companies. It was quite spread out. What I think is maybe more telling when we think about facilities management, always the case, FM departments are much smaller than the larger organization or company. So we really want to know the job level. And what we found was that it was divided almost equally across people who manage employees, supervisors, and those who manage supervisors. So on average, 1 to 5 employees reported to the people who responded to our survey. So again, I think the diversity and variety there was quite great and fantastic to see. So we can feel more confident or that the results are more reliable when we have that variety. So still in current state here, we want to find out and understand when we look at FM training, there's different sources, different ways that you can get trained in facilities management when you are in the professional working world. Oftentimes companies try to sort of build within and have their own internal training to their company and or go without and outside of their company, third parties or manufacturers or professional associations. So that distinction we have seen in 2017 was very important to separate and identify in terms of the current state. For the internal perspective, we found that 33% of companies don't have any internal training. So some of them just can't even really operate in that space for a variety of reasons. And those that do have it, 39% are happy with it. So we can possibly say there's room for improvement here when we talk about internal training. If you have it, it may need some work. When we talk about external training, again, third parties, professional associations, manufacturers, others outside of the company, 25% don't have external FM training conducted by others. So a little bit lower, so more of them do have it. In terms of external versus internal, we rely a little bit more on external, which makes sense. You know, there are experts outside of our company. 47% are satisfied with it. So again, a little bit higher satisfaction there, but still maybe quite not meeting the mark. So this current state tells us there's definitely room for improvement, which I think almost all of us on this call can agree. If we were to list out all of our own credentials and training, it would form a rainbow, what's the cornucopia of different options, which is fantastic because there are options. 10, 15 years ago, there weren't as many options. Now we have options, which is great. But how good are those options? It's nice to have options, but it's nice to have high quality options where people are happy with it and feel that they got the training that they needed. When we still look at the current state, but with IFMA credentials, so when we have those job ads where we're hiring for people to come to our company in facilities management, those FM job postings, how often are employers listing IFMA credentials as desired or required? That is also kind of telling. So let's say we can't necessarily afford or we can't necessarily provide internal training. What we can do is require it so the new people coming in already have it, so it kind of shifts the responsibility to them. So what we found was 54% of respondents, they do have FMP in their FM job postings, which is quite a large amount. 39% have the CFM in their IFMA post in their FM job posting, excuse me, and 44% have the SFP in their job postings. So we are seeing that these are becoming required and or desired. We did ask this in 2017. So we have a point of comparison. How have things changed in the last 5 to 6 years? And we've seen a 147% increase in companies requiring IFMA credentials. So more often now, those are required as a point of entry into a company as a job ad, which again is kind of shifting that to the individual to get their training or get their credentials before they come to work at company X. Next up, we looked at the funding. So once again, some of us may have paid for our training or continue to pay for our training and credentials on our own. Others may have the ability to ask for it within their company and the good fortune that they do. 49% of companies, they do fully pay for their employees' training, FM training. 76% of companies financially support external FM. Okay. Sorry, that was my bad. So a total of 76 do financially support it. There's partial reimbursement, or there's partial payment, and then there's full payment. So of the 76% of companies that say, yep, we're going to pay for it in some fashion, 49% will pay the whole thing, and 27% will pay partially. So even if you can only get $1,000 or whatever amount that is, and it doesn't fully cover the training, some companies are willing to at least provide, a little bit of sustenance or way to tackle that cost. And so again, this tells us a little bit about the current state of the value of just FM training overall to companies. When we look at 2017, which we did ask this question, we're seeing a 68% increase in companies that are financially supporting the external FM trading, which is fantastic to see. So we all know 2017 was pre-COVID, but a lot of things have changed outside of COVID. So when we think about that time scale, we're seeing the value, and companies are not only requiring it, but they are also paying for it. So it isn't just like my earlier statement, you got to have it to come in. If you're already in, we're seeing that companies are increasingly paying for their employees' external FM training, which gets me excited, right? It's an investment. All right, so that was the current state. Now moving on to key findings from approvers. So again, we know not every company can necessarily put forth either full or partial payment, but there's typically a decision maker that decides full or not, if that is provided by the company. And so what do they think? Because they're the ones that kind of check the box or submit the paperwork or whatever that might be, kind of give their seal of approval. So of the respondents, 46% do fit that category. Either they currently and or previously had authority to approve external FM training for their employees. So, which isn't surprising because again, our departments are small, 1 to 5 on average. So we are seeing the people who responded, most of them do have that approval rights. So now talking to that group specifically, we asked them, how do you measure the value? So what are the kinds of things that you look at? Overall, very helpful information. So these are some of the key highlights. Again, the report will have more details. How do they measure the value? Well, they look to see if that individual has better application of the knowledge or better understanding of that knowledge in facilities or added value, which I think most of us can agree and understand that is needed. And then their performance. So we do expect to see those. That is how the value is measured. Other factors are efficiency, confidence, which is a little squishy, hard to measure, competency, and then of course it does kind of depend on what it is. If someone goes to a one-day training about topic X, they're not as maybe focused on topic Y, or if someone gets their IFMA credentials, which cover a broad range of knowledge, that expectation wouldn't be the same as someone attending a small webinar like this. What do approvers consider when deciding to fund or not? So again, they're the decision makers. Where they kind of drawing the line in the sand and saying, yeah, you can go to that, I'll pay for that, or we won't pay for that, or we shouldn't ask for that, we should ask for this. Or my performance review, what are those kinds of things that my supervisor or manager would be looking out for me to prioritize or consider the training of versus, nah, you can go to that next year. So the top 4 is number 1 is the potential value it brings to the employee's current job function, which isn't surprising. We're very focused on present. I would venture to say that most training gives us growth for the future, and we'll talk about job promotion and how it situates individuals for that. But it's really kind of about the present. How is it going to help that employee now in their position and role right now? Then next, of course, is the content or subject matter. And then third is the cost, which in interviews and other circles, none of us really like to say, oh, well, it's just too expensive, because that isn't encouraging for an employee, but it is a factor and it is something to consider. And it is something that a lot of training organizations look at, and they want to be competitive. Then, of course, there's a reputation or prestige of the credential. So is this something that just brand new training, brand new course, something that isn't tried and true and tested? These are the kinds of things, once again, that those people who make the decision of whether to fund or not or support or not are thinking in their decision making if they're going to give the green light or not. Lastly, the key findings or the value of IFMA credentials to companies. So again, we've talked about the current state. We've talked about what do those that are the gatekeepers of the funding and the approvals hold and their perspective. And now we're talking about IFMA credentials specifically and the value of IFMA credentials to companies. Got to compare, right? And we asked point blank, if you responded to the survey, we were very specific, and you may have had to read it twice. But the point is to compare. And most of these organizations have those that are IFMA credentialed within their staff and those that are not IFMA credentialed. So we literally asked how they compare. And I would love to challenge anyone who wants to email me after or stay on this call to give me their employees' performance reviews, and we can compare it tit for tat. But most people can't do that, aren't willing to do that. And so we understand that. So we just said, okay, based on your awareness, your understanding, and your knowledge, compare the two or compare the groups. Typically it's groups, right? So in terms of performance, people rated that employees who have an IFMA credential or IFMA credentials have increased their performance appraisal ratings over time. So they're by 61% agreed that they're exceeding and increasing their performance appraisal ratings over time. So those are kind of maybe known, maybe obvious. What about customer satisfaction? So a lot of the companies and all of us in general have customers, right? So what are the customers seeing on their end in terms of those who are IFMA credentialed and those who are not? So employees who have an IFMA credential or more than one have increased their customer satisfaction ratings over time. Once again, more than employees without an IFMA credential. 62% agreed. Last one was employees who have an IFMA credential or more than one have increased their productivity rates over time, more so than employees without a credential. And 67% agreed. So in performance, customer satisfaction, and production, companies are seeing the value. They're seeing that improvement. And as we know, those benefit companies. Yes, it's always nice as an employee to feel valued by your customer and your customer loves you and appreciates you, and it makes work more enjoyable. But those indicators and those things bring more value to the company than the employee. So again, the benefit is seen there. Now, what about those when it comes to benefits to the employee and not the company overall? They agree that IFMA credentials do positively influence promotion and or compensation. So 73% of respondents agreed that the CFM would positively influence job promotion or compensation for a current employee. So we do have those who are already within our companies wanting to get those credentials. And so having achieved those credentials, how does that position them for the future in terms of promotion and or compensation? 57% of respondents agree that the FMP would positively influence job promotion and compensation for a current employee. And then 50% of respondents agree that the SFP would positively influence job promotion compensation for a current employee. So again, these credentials are not only benefiting the companies in terms of production performance and customer satisfaction, but their employees are getting positioned and getting ready there for that promotion, compensation, and sort of job shift. Do IFMA credentials merit, the next question, do IFMA credentials merit higher salary and or compensation? 73% of respondents agree that the CFM merits higher compensation. So that is overwhelming response. 52% agree that the FMP merits higher compensation, and 23% agree that the SFP merits higher compensation. So again, positioning the employee to get a higher salary or compensation. When we look at 2017, this is exciting. Huge increase. I mean, massive increase. We are seeing now companies really recognizing what employees bring now to the table with their IFMA credentials. So we've seen a 152 increase in the influence and merit of IFMA credentials to companies since 2017. That recognition is coming, that positive compensation, promotion, they're seeing how that actually does help employees get to that level, and they are promoting them. Take a sip of water. So now back to the company perspective. We talked about performance, production, and customer satisfaction. Then, of course, I open-ended it and I said, tell me everything. And again, this is something that I poured over, and there's so many responses. So the detailed report will have a lot more detail. But overall, summarizing it at a level that I can present it and understand and explain to you all today, what are those company-wide benefits of employees earning an IFMA credential, or maybe more than one IFMA credential? Without me poking or saying anything, everyone came back to say they saw an improvement in the quality of service provided. So what employees are giving to the customer and end client, that quality is improving. The next benefit was elevating our company standards to be closer in line with industry best practices. That's one that I think isn't well vocalized or understood, is that when employees go to that training, or IFMA training, when they get their credentials, they're being exposed to industry best in class, best practices, and they're kind of having their perspective and their eyes opened. When you think about the career trajectory of facility managers, is there a lot of movement? Does an individual, like one person, see 10 to 15 companies in their career lifetime? Probably not right away, or maybe not at all. Maybe they're spending typically more time at one or two employers, and they're seeing how that company does it. Versus in IFMA credentials and even other training, your eyes are opened. So being able to elevate your company standards to be closer in line with industry best practices is what they're seeing the benefit of those IFMA credentials. And then, of course, client satisfaction and experience. So that was, once again, vocalized. The satisfaction rate with the value of IFMA credentials for their employees. So we had to have that last send off. Okay, give it to me in numbers. We talked about benefits. You gave us all that information. Now give us numbers. So 76% are satisfied with the value of IFMA credentials for their employees. And again, the report will have a little bit more detail about that. So those are the key findings in terms of current state, in terms of what those that hold the financial gatekeeping key say for their approval, and then specific to IFMA credentials, what are the value and benefits that companies are seeing to those IFMA credentials. Happy to take any questions. Let's see here if there are questions. Let's see here. Okay, here's a comment. Okay, so there might be a slight delay because of the stream lag. Okay, no worries, no worries. One thing I will say, there are a couple of participants that attend these presentations quite a bit, and at some point, somewhere along the line, I've said some of these taglines, and I think it'll maybe trigger some questions for some people, but as someone who has been in training, higher education, and professional development and facilities management, you kind of think through the perspective of the questioning of, should I invest in my employees or not? Obviously, these benefits and everything is really important to look at, and all the data. But the kicker I found is this quote by, it was someone anonymous. I don't think it was attributed to anyone. Is, most people are worried about making that investment in their employees. So the contrary to that is, okay, what if I invest in my people and they leave? Like, that's the biggest fear. I pay for the training and then they just leave 6 months later or immediately after they finish their training. But have you ever thought about what happens if you don't invest in your people's training and they stay? That outcome is probably not something you would want either. So again, I know it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but had to say it. So I think a question came in here. Surgeries, attorneys, advice commitment. Okay. Yeah, so someone said, so Mohammed said, obtaining the CFM credential can enhance your professional credibility, open up career advancement opportunities, and increase your earning potential within the facility management field. It signifies a commitment to professional development and staying current with industry best practices. Absolutely. I think really all the data hit on everything you just said and solidify what you just said in terms of numbers. The commitment piece is huge, and I think some of that has to also do with becoming, a member of a professional association or community that cares about industry best practices and standards. So some of that could be obtained also through membership with IFMA, but I absolutely agree, Mohammed. And again, we have now the data again to prove it. Any other questions? When I was, oh, sorry, go ahead. I think someone's going to talk. So when I was going through the data and comparing the 2017 report to this, once again, that improvement and that increase, I think we've really come a long way since then, even just that short period of time, in recognizing the importance and the value of investing in our employees, not only because we feel like it's the right thing to do, but it helps the company. And I think so often people take training to check a box and it doesn't always provide value to the company. But when you think about IFMA and what it exposes everyone to and all the training and how the training was designed and built, those credentials really do bring sort of that extra layer and understanding and sustainment, as Mohammed said, about the commitment and industry best in class and best practices. So it's not just taking training to check a box, it's helping the company and it's helping the individual. So next question, what are the eligibility requirements for obtaining an IFMA credential? So there are 3 different IFMA credentials, and Ashley, I don't know if you want to speak to any of that, but there are specific details for each one of those individually, the FMP, the SFP, and the CFM. Did Ashley or someone want to speak in more detail about that?
I don't feel confident in giving all of the details for the requirements. Sure. There are some for basically anybody can take the FMP or the SFP, where you go through the modules, you complete the courses, you pass the final assessment, and that'll get you your credential. In relation to the CFM, that is based off of a combination of your experience, your education, and your confidence. There's no requirements or courses or anything that you have to take. You simply pay the exam fee and sit for the exam and pass the exam. But awesome. If you would like to look at more details, just visit ifma.org and you'll be able to find that information off of our professional development credentials.
Yeah, to go and get the latest and greatest for sure. Mm-hmm. All right, I saw another question come in. How do I develop myself and upgrade courses, workshops, etc., to be in check with current FM practices? So that's a great question. I think we saw kind of most are going externally to do that. And obviously, with this presentation being focused on the value of IFMA credentials, those benefits are tied to IFMA credentials specifically. So developing yourself and upgrading, once again, IFMA has those 3 credentials that you should explore if you haven't already, that do discuss and explain industry best practices and current practices. So Jeff, that would maybe be one to kind of explore. I don't know, is there a link we could provide, Ashley or Nick? Do we want to, or is there some sort of follow-up after the workshop?
Ashley, isn't there an assessment that IFMA supports?
Yes, we do have the self-assessment tool. Let me find that link and I'll get that for you.
Awesome. Jeff, you remind me of a tagline. It was IFMA's got a lot of amazing publications and reading material, and they have the FMJ, the Facilities Management Journal. I think it's still called that. And there was a tagline I stole at least 10 years ago, and it was the cover said FM, Facilities Management, the accidental profession. And I think it explains it so well, hopefully not offending anyone, but a lot of us don't necessarily kind of like start our careers thinking, yep, we're going to be in facilities management. We're going to be in this line of work, and this is what we're going to do. A lot of us kind of find our way to facilities through other channels for a variety of reasons. 2 of them being, when you think about facilities management overall, it isn't just like one thing. IFMA defines it with 11 core competencies, everything from real estate to operations to human factors, finances, all this stuff. And so you could be from anywhere with 11 of those areas and find your way to facilities management, filling in part of that puzzle piece of facilities management in your career. And the other is no one knows what they want to be when they grow up. So we all just kind of end up different ways. But yeah, Jeff, that reminded me of that quote. Any other questions?
I was going to say, how about a show of hand from our attendees that have attained an IFMA credential? Nice presentation, Kristen. I see I'm showing up as a ghost here. Let me turn that off. And anyways, thank you for your presentation. I wanted to thank all the attendees for attending today. The respondents that participated in the study, you should have a copy of the final report within about 2 to maybe 3 weeks, hopefully before the end of November is our goal. And if you have any questions, please definitely do contact us related to a copy of the presentation. Should they email us, Kristen, or email you for a copy? What works for you?
Sure.
Okay. Go ahead and email Kristen. And again, any other additional questions, please let us know. We're always here to answer those questions. Comments?
I see some people posted that what they have, their credentials. Promote yourself, like not like give yourself a promotion, but talk about it. Share that. So often, we get our training and our professional development, and it always doesn't result in something on the wall. When it does, it's cool. We put it on the wall, but we got to talk about it. We got to encourage others. We have to increase this dialogue because that's how we're going to raise the quality of the profession. You guys talk about best in class practices and industry best practices. We only get there and advance those by advancing our people. So talk about it. Get a credential, don't put it in the closet, bring it out, put it on your email signature, talk about it, and we can all sort of raise the quality here of best in class.
I see Jeff has another question for us, which is an excellent question.
So how do I build networks of facility managers in the industry that will benefit my career? So I'm thinking your question relates to like networking to benefit your career. I can take this one to just tell you my personal thoughts. Is the importance of your network in any line of work and anything you do is super critical. It's kind of one of those things that you don't realize you need it until it's too late. In my opinion, professional associations are a great way to network. I don't know where you are, Jeff, if you're close to like an IFMA chapter. There's other professional associations. There's also like study groups for the FMP and the CFM, I believe, and the SFP, which is again through the IFMA chapter. Of course, there's conferences that you can go to. IFMA does have conferences as well. There's networking events within those IFMA chapters. And then there's also online communities and forums. Again, I don't know where you're at, if that would work better in terms of connecting to people. Obviously, there's, LinkedIn. I don't know how well that gets you developing those relationships, but I think that is important. And like I said, professional associations, conferences, any sort of meetings or presentations they have, online groups and forums. I know in the Benchmarking Institute, there's a lot of opportunity to contribute. Nick, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but there's panels and ways that you can contribute to facilities management research where you could also meet others and network.
Yes. Within the IFMA world, one of the top 3 reasons members join IFMA is to network. And so we do have a lot of different events globally. We just finished with our World Workplace North America conference in Denver. This past September. Also, if you're a member of IFMA, your local chapters, your councils, your communities, as Kristen said, those are definitely key groups to engage with. The other thing is through research and benchmarking as well, we do put out a call for subject matter experts, for individuals to participate in different studies that we have ongoing. That's another way to meet your fellow FM and engage more in terms of that type of specificity, if you will. And so there are multiple opportunities here to engage and grow your network within facility management. Okay. In that case, I wanted to again thank everyone for attending and thank you for participating, and we will be in touch in the next webinar. Thank you.